Okay, yet again, welcome here for the lecture concerning the toward updating the European Code of Good Practice for Hyperbaric Oxygen Therapy. First of all, I hope that you know the document at least briefly in some general approach, but I would like to remind you that this document is already 10 years old because it is dated 2004. It is not very long, it is only 68 pages, so theoretically speaking I could read it loudly to you just as a replacement of this speech. Linguistically, the title European Code of Good Practice is correct because according to the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary, the code is a set of principles that are accepted and used by society or a particular group of people, for example a moral code or a code of behavioral and ethics. However, its implementation is not expected, and the violation of the European Code of Good Practice is not treated the same as the Bushido Code, which forced people to do the seppuku if they violated the code. We are working on this and the implementation of this. However, our executive board is still thinking how to reach those people. Nevertheless, that's why I think that we are closer to pirates, because pirates were saying that you must be a pirate for the pirates code to apply, and it's more what we can call guidelines than actual rules. In fact, the document was created during the Cause Before Inaction, which was the scientific research in Europe involving many European countries, and the chairman was Professor Daniel Mathieu from France. And at that time we installed also the OXYNET, which is a database with medical hyperbaric facility operating in European Union, wanting to cooperate with each other. In fact, at the first stage, when creating the European Code of Good Practice, we identified 4 countries where already there were some national regulations concerning the hyperbaric facility. In fact, there were 89 facilities working under the national control of local regulations. Then we added also some clinical experience from well-known countries which had a lot of practice in hyperbaric medicine. However, they were not having yet any national regulations. This added the list of 42 other hyperbaric centers. And we also added other hyperbaric centers, including also Turkey, which was well known from their practice inside the hyperbaric facility. Later on, when the European Code of Good Practice was installed already or were published, after that date, the next hyperbaric centers were installed inside the European Union. At least in some countries, in most of countries, it was 43 hyperbaric centers. And even what is more interesting for us, there were several new hyperbaric centers created in those countries who are not belonging yet to European Union, but soon they will be, and it is expected that more than 20 million of population will be added to the to European Union after those countries joining it. In fact, the Code of Good Practice describes also the structure of the Center for Hyperbaric Medicine, just defining the hyperbaric chamber as the installation, the hyperbaric system, which means the pressure vessels plus the air compressors, air and oxygen storage, plus the hyperbaric facility with all the technical stuff which is necessary to operate from the technical point of view, with some addition to be converted to the medical hyperbaric facility, which means that we need also the medical staff. There is also the necessity to cooperate with other units in the hospital, critical care unit, emergency room, or other medical services to become the Center for Hyperbaric Medicine. And I present you this graph because this graph is also on the first page of the European Code, and this is a kind of a logo of this document. At the moment, I would like to discuss with you a little bit of the hazards concerning the hyperbaric medicine in general, because we must identify some risks which the hyperbaric medicine faces in 21st century. And definitely we can discuss several points, including lack of recognition recognition of hyperbaric oxygen therapy efficacy, lack of evidences of hyperbaric oxygen therapy safety, presence of different modalities for oxygenation as competitions for this kind of treatment, list of indications based on experts' opinion only and not on scientific evidences, as well as underestimation of price for hyperbaric treatment. In most countries, I do believe this is also outside the European Union, however, I would like to discuss mostly in the European Union, those risks are of the greatest interest for us to discuss. Due to lack of time, I will not discuss the lack of recognition of hyperbaric oxygen efficacy, nor the lack of evidences of safety. This is the subjects for the another lecture. Right now I will discuss 3 other points as hazards for hyperbaric medicine. Different modalities for oxygenation as competitions for hyperbaric oxygen treatment is definitely well defined, and it is perceived by many experts in the field. This includes local oxygen therapy, implantable monoplace chambers, so-called mild hyperbaric treatment, which is offered privately, and low fraction oxygen supplementation. Those are recognized as a competitions for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, even if from scientific point of view they are not. I am not going into detail from the scientific nor medical point of view. I would like to discuss you with the organizational problems and preparing for the update of the European Code. In fact, implantable low pressure monoplace chambers has become a large problem in the United States. We are waiting for these problems to occur also in European Union, but we saw that temporarily they had been accepted by the FDA for all indications by the UHMS, enlisted by the UHMS, even if they were incapable to do the treatment for any pressure which is necessary to do the hyperbaric treatment. Fortunately, following prompt response by the UHMS, the FDA withdrew this clearance for those hyperbaric chambers, but still they are offered for the private hands. And in fact, we can see that monoplace chambers or low and mild hyperbaric treatment is quite frequently used by people. And the problem is not only using those hyperbaric chambers, but also installation of the oxygen inside. Because theoretically speaking, monoplace chamber in this edition or the low hyperbaric pressure treatment modalities should not use the oxygen while inside these devices. I saw pictures, however I do not have with me, that kids are also using computers while breathing the oxygen in the open circuit inside the implantable monoplace chamber. So definitely this is the hazards. The other hazard is risk of indications for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and here you see one example from the country which quite recently joined the European Union, but several years before joining the European Union, they presented their own indications for the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is still effective. And inside this list, most of those indications came from the European Committee for Hyperbaric Medicine. Some of them came from the UHMS list of indications, but there are some added indications to be accepted for treatment, like Bell's palsy, without any Cochrane reviews supporting this idea, also open-angle glaucoma, as well as Buerger's and Raynaud disease, which are accepted for treatment of the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And we are seriously considering that this is a little bit of a hazard, because negative results of this treatment will put a shadow on the hyperbaric medicine per se, perceived at least in Europe, but I do believe that worldwide it will be said that it shouldn't be used, and we will go back to be perceived as an alternative therapy. And for many years we are fighting to avoid this point. The another one example, which is done in original language in German this time, But it says simply that in the 90s, in Germany, they accepted tinnitus as an accepted indications for treatment, even where there were no scientific support for the rationale of using hyperbaric oxygenation in tinnitus. And after that, it was accepted for treatment, and the treatment was reimbursed. A lot of private hyperbaric centers were installed in Germany with the boom in hyperbaric treatment. The problem was, as it should be expected, that after several years, the national insurer in Germany perceived that a lot of money is going for ineffective treatment, and they stopped supporting ambulatory services for any indication in hyperbaric medicine. And only for many, many years in Germany, they were forced to conduct their own study to support the evidences to restart the reimbursement of the ambulatory patients, which means that this is a really problem for the hazard for the hyperbaric medicine in any country. If we will lose control when the hyperbaric medicine is used, we can expect some incomes, financial income, but definitely this is short-sighted vision, because later on it will have a lot of negative effects concerning the other parts. Another point is the underestimation of prices or the costs of the hyperbaric session. In fact, several years ago, together with Dr. Kiyotaka Koshi from Japan, we did a review or survey concerning how much the hyperbaric session costs in different countries all over the world. And you see here prices in the local currency. I really don't know why South Africa was not included in the survey, but probably we had not received any response, which is quite unusual because we are always receiving. So probably this is my fault, okay? That it was not sent here. Obviously, it is very difficult to compare. That's why I recalculated this to euro. And here you see prices both for standard HBO session and emergency or intensive care session, and you see that minimum price for the standard hyperbaric session is 18 euro. Can you imagine that this price is in Japan? And the highest price for hyperbaric session in emergency mode is more than 9,000 euro, and this is in UK. That's why so many Polish physicians are emigrated for working. And really, I don't know why I'm still in Poland, where we have the only 130 euro. The most important part in this is a large discrepancy all over the world between the minimum and maximum amount of money which is paid for the service of the hyperbaric session. And the factor, as you see, is roughly 100. In fact, we can say that in different countries, euro or dollar is differently counted. That's why we did a recalculation, and we used the science of Burgernomics, and it was published as a Big Mac index. It is well-known factor or coefficient for calculating, assuming that Big Mac is exactly the same all over the world. In fact, it is different, and I was wondering why the shape in Australia is a little bit different, but later on I reminded myself that Australia is on the different side, so the Big Mac is lying simply on the different point, and this picture should be reverted. Nevertheless, when recalculating the prices of hyperbaric sessions, we can see that still the same differences in prices are existing. So it means that in some countries the one hyperbaric session costs only 6 Big Macs, and the maximum cost for standard session is 100 times more expensive, and the same concerning the emergency or intensive care sessions while inside the hyperbaric chamber. Therefore, we have to face the problem that in some countries, this is what happens right now in Japan, there are problems with underestimation of prices for hyperbaric session. The same we have in several European countries, as well as you see that for example, in some countries this is not enough to be paid for hyperbaric session. I'm not quite sure how are you, what is the cost of HBO session, but later on it would be interesting to recalculate to the same factor just to see where are we. By the way, I must to have a disclaimer. I declare no conflict of interest, as I have never ever received any single Big Mac for free. Okay, as a father of twins, I really left a lot of money there. so for sure, yeah. The another part which I would like to discuss before going to the update of the document is the status of the medical devices inside hyperbaric chamber in Europe. And this is a good summary on Europe, which most of you probably know, is the comparison what would happen if the Europe would be reflected in hell and in heaven. In hell and in heaven, okay? First, in heaven, the police would be British, the cooks would be French, the engineers German, the administrators Swiss, and the lovers Italian. But definitely in hell, the police are German, the cooks are British, the engineers are Italian, the administrators are French, and the lovers are Swiss. I'm not quite sure where you... okay. In fact, in Europe, we passed a long way, starting from the very simple pressure vessels up to the rectangular hyperbaric chamber, which are fully capable to accept patients in the surrounding on the intensive care unit, even fulfilling all requirements for intensive care unit while under the pressure. That's for there was a long way how to go there, concerning mostly of medical devices at this part. And I would like to remind you shortly that according to the Medical Device Directive in Europe, the chamber itself and all equipment which is introduced into it should be CE marked, covering the hyperbaric environmental condition. CE mark means something from French, but in fact a lot of people are saying that this means China export. Nevertheless, the CE marking symbol means that this device could be freely moved inside the European Union and declares the conformity with the safety regulations, with some norms and some at least directives for this. And the problem is that nowadays only few devices in Europe are CE marked and are allowed to go inside the hyperbaric chamber. Namely, this is very old French ventilator Lama, which is obsolete and should not be used. This is only for historical purposes. Drager Hyperlock, which is also obsolete, very old device, and we have only two ventilators. One is Italian Ciaretron, and the another one is quite fresh, McUnits Servo I HBO, which can be inputted inside, which can be put inside the hyperbaric chamber. We have only one syringe pump, which is pilot hyperbaric Fresenius, and for monitoring system is easier because for monitoring you know that we can put the cables through the chamber and we can put whatever monitor we want to be outside and only modules could be inside, so the situation is completely different. Nevertheless, those new devices, I would like to show you a few pictures thanks to courtesy of team from Karolinska Institute of Peter Kronlund and Volker Lind, new ventilator which is McUnits Servo I HBO. Only few are already installed all over the world, and this is quite interesting situation because this is a modern ventilator which can be used also in the intensive care unit, and it was accepted inside the hyperbaric chamber because all the chase is ventilated with the nitrogen in order to deplete the oxygen and in order to decrease the temperature. There is a constantly flush of the chase of this ventilator with the dumping system for nitrogen, and all those batteries are removed when the ventilator is installed inside the hyperbaric chamber. The another device which I showed you previously is a Core Plus 3 with which is the wireless equipment which can be put inside the hyperbaric chamber with the option for defibrillation and pacemaker, but this one I already presented to you. So last year we did a survey to check what kind of medical devices in fact hyperbaric centers are using, because we are interested how many of them are relying on the CE marking. And using the list of the OXYNET hyperbaric centers, we have roughly 250 hyperbaric centers included in the OXYNET. We sent 216 emails. Unfortunately, a lot of them were undeliverable. Fortunately, we received something like 50 responses, which gives us the response rate of 30%. Fortunately, at the same time, we did, I mean, in the United States, they did exactly the same survey, and they received the response rate of 24%. So this is worldwide response rate for such kind of service, at least in the hyperbaric units. And concerning those 50, roughly 50 received answers, both multi and monoplace chambers were installed only in 7 centers. Most hyperbaric centers are having multiplace chambers, and only few are only monoplace chambers. What is interesting, that 33 of those centers use medical equipment inside the hyperbaric chamber. So it means that 16 centers, which is roughly 1/3, do not use any medical equipment while inside the hyperbaric chamber. And this includes 5 monoplace chambers and 11 multiplace chambers. So this is quite interesting, that we are expecting that all hyperbaric facilities can accept patients with the intensive care in emergency mode, fully supported with the modern critical care, but in fact they do not have the devices to be used, even if they're having the multiplace chambers, which theoretically should be able to do this. And in our intention, according to the Code of Good Practice, this should be also the intention. That's why we should work on this, and I will show you later on conclusions of this. Out of 33 those medical centers who are using the medical devices inside, only 6 of them are using only CE mark devices. So it means that only 20% are using those devices who are officially marked for use in the hyperbaric environment. The rest of them are putting the devices on after some additional risk assessment. So they should do the risk assessment in order to check whether these devices should be used inside the hyperbaric chamber. Interestingly, 11 centers declared only external risk assessment, means done by the third-party company. 8 centers declared both external and internal checking. 5 centers declared only internal checking of the system or risk assessment, and 8 centers declared no formal risk assessment. So they are putting the medical devices inside the hyperbaric chamber, relying only on medical experience or of knowledge from the literature, or just feeling that this device could be used inside the hyperbaric chamber. When concerning the CE mark device, it is Italian Ciaretron, Maquet Servo, and Steel Dragger Hyperlock, which is used inside the, even if this is quite old, in some center it is still used, sometimes as a backup, sometimes as a primary ventilator. And other ventilators include Steel Servo 900C, Evita 4, Dragger Oxylock, Penlon Oxyfold, Brian Avian, and Newport transport ventilator. However, those 2 are used only for a backup. For medical devices inside the hyperbaric chamber, for monitoring, we see a lot of solutions. As I told you previously, some of those systems are relying on the transfer of the signals through the chamber wall, so in fact they don't need to be accepted in general for use in hyperbaric conditions. Only sensors or only internal modules must be checked before entering into the hyperbaric chamber. Another equipment which is put inside the hyperbaric chamber among those facilities includes some devices concerning TCP-O2, concerning syringes. This is Brown Perfuser Secura, Argus syringe pump, Alaris, Wellmed syringe, Terumo, Wright spirometer, Megatract respiration monitor for monitoring the ventilation of patients. As I told you previously, the Physiocontrol LifePack 1000, which was accepted by Germany Shelloy to be put inside the hyperbaric chamber, However, one center is using also LifePack 20 as a defibrillator, just putting the device outside the chamber, and pads are installed on the patient inside the hyperbaric chamber, and another glucometers, tonometers or otoscopes which are entered inside the hyperbaric chamber. When considering the implantable devices and the policy used, 50% declares some kind of a policy for implantable devices, which means what the physician should do if the patient comes for treatment with the implanted devices. And some of those centers, 13 centers, are requesting external approval from the manufacturer for the specific type of the device for the single patients or for the series of patients with the same device. And only one center declared policy for deep brain stimulators, which is up to 2 atmosphere absolute inside the hyperbaric chamber. Coming back to the document, which the main subject of this presentation is European Code of Good Practice, and the objective of use of European Code of Good Practice and the way that this document can support hyperbaric medicine, we did also the SWOT analysis, which consists of identification of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And definitely the strength of this document is that it described all attributes of safe standard hyperbaric session, and it can be used as a reference document for guidelines, regulation and standards in hyperbaric medicine. The weaknesses includes 2 general approach, for example position of medical attendant, use of monoplace chamber and off-label indication, and 2 general approach is due to need for a consensus in different European countries, because in some countries it is necessary that physician must be touching the wall of the hyperbaric chamber during the session, immediately ready to go to the chamber. In another centers or in another countries it is said that he should be immediately available, not defining what does it mean, whether the another building means immediately available or he is immediately available to go to the car at home, just to go to the hospital, just to do the intervention. This document gives also some opportunities, because I mean that this document must face some opportunities for this document to be used, because there is a need for creation of a new hyperbaric chambers at least in Europe, because we estimate that due to epidemiological reasons, something like 1 hyperbaric center or chamber should be installed per 1 million of population. This is counted that way that, theoretically speaking, 1 million of populations have enough diseases to be treated inside the hyperbaric chamber. Okay, it means that in Europe there is still a place for new hyperbaric chamber. New countries are joining European Union, that's why they need some sort of regulations. And the free exchange of medical services in European Union, I presented you already the situation, is forcing us or is suggesting us that this is opportunity for code. If the code would be accepted, would be updated, it can be used and support the free exchange of medical services. However, there are some threats also for hyperbaric medicine: lack of recognition of efficacy, of safety, different oxygen methods as a competition, underestimation of price and indication based only on experts' opinion. This is what I told you previously. That's why, as a conclusion of this presentation, I would like to say that European Code has been prepared by international cooperation of experts which had knowledge and experience in clinical practice of hyperbaric medicine. This document can be used as an international guidelines or as a reference document, mostly in those countries where there is a lack of formal rules, and the process of updating, which is currently being conducted, must be directed by its internal weaknesses and external threats to hyperbaric medicine. And the scope of this document should be extended also to reflect the modern requirements for treatment modalities, intensive care and extensive use of medical devices while inside hyperbaric chamber. Thank you very much.